cannibals served meat pies to the schools. They lived amongst humans. They led a normal life, but they ate human flesh for lunch and dinner. This is a story of a murderer who organized a cannibal's den with the aid of his wife and mistress. The women will set the trap, while he would execute the victims. These are cannibals living amongst humans. Anything could go wrong. How did they come to be, and what did they do with their victims' flesh? Jorge Beltrão Negromanchi da Silveira is a Brazilian man who lives in a discreet house located in Emboaba Street, Petropolis Gardens, on the outskirts of Garanhuns. Jorge, aged 53, lived together with his wife Isabel Perez, aged 54. The couple looked like a normal regular family who was harmless, but behind the normalcy was a dreadful secret. Although they were living together, the couple had been living a separated life that no one knew about. To others, they were doing just fine. Jorge's wife was famous for her meat pie, a greasy and delicious pastry snack that leaves people wondering about the type of meat used in it. When asked, Isabel would respond that she uses tuna or chicken, and that would be the end. Many thought that she just had a special recipe that made the meat pie taste so different. But little did they know that the source of this famous meat pie was a gory one that would leave everyone in shock and rage.
Eu nunca fui de matar ninguém. Eu sempre respeitei a vida.
The trio was arrested back in 2012 after they tried to use the credit card of a woman who had gone missing for days. The police were alerted as an active search for the missing woman had begun. On getting to Jorge's home, they found a 5-year-old girl who showed them where the bones of 2 women had been buried. The girl would later be identified as the child belonging to one of the victims. In a photo taken at one of their trials, Jorge is seen bending over to kiss his mistress's hand, while his wife looks on. It is hard to find anyone who would share their spouse's intimacy with someone else, but this trio have managed to make their partnership work. Bruna Cristina Oliveira, aged 28, came into Jorge's life after what seems to have been a tumultuous time in the couple's lives, or so it seemed. They have both been unable to bear a child after years of being together. As a result, the mistress was welcomed into their lives for the main purpose of bearing him a child. Perhaps, if Jorge has another woman who is younger and has better chances of getting pregnant, they will bear children, or at least a child. In truth, however, Bruna had known Jorge long before she came into the couple's lives. Jorge was one of the karate teachers at a local Atlantic club where Bruna used to train when she was much younger. Bruna reported that Jorge was a well-respected man, and he was very intelligent. He had a certain charm that drew everyone's attention to him. He claimed that a lot of the girls at the karate class fell in love with his charm, and she wasn't exempted. When they, Jorge and Bruna, finally became an item, Bruna mentioned that Jorge told her he was married, but they were living separate lives. Also at that time, he claimed Isabel had her boyfriend as well. This love triangle, filled with madness, would soon become a deadly group of cannibals, living amongst regular people. Although they experienced what parenting a child could be, they never had children as they were caught before any of that could happen. One of their victims was 17-year-old Jessica Camila da Silva. This was their first recorded victim. She made a huge mistake when visiting the cannibal's den. She brought her toddler along. The result was devastating.
Você sentia prazer vendo aquele sofrimento todo?
Não. Ficava apavorada.
Joyce sentia prazer?
Para ele era uma coisa normal.
Camila da Silva was to be interviewed as a babysitter for the family, but unfortunately, she met her abrupt end. She was killed in the presence of her then 18-month-old toddler. Worse still, Camila's flesh was fed to her child for lunch the following day. These cannibals raised the 18-month-old toddler as their own for the next 4 years, feeding her human flesh and teaching her the ways of cannibals. Their training was cut short after they were caught by the police. The child, who was called Victoria, was very useful to the investigation process. The magnitude of Victoria's involvement in the cannibalistic act is not known. Was she ever present when all the killings happened? Did she take part in their ritual of separating human flesh from their bones? These are some of the questions that remained unanswered. However, it is believed that Victoria was able to determine what was wrong and right. Many claim that this was the reason why she was the first person to show the police where the bones were buried. It is safe to say that every human at whatever age develops the consciousness of right and wrong. While the women lured their victims into their homes, Jorge did the killing. There were no proper calculations as to the kinds of people they were looking for. Jorge called the shots and the women followed. There was also no age limit, but most of their victims were between 15 to 30 years of age. These victims were those Jorge considered as lowlives and ill-educated women in the society. They were also women who could be easily lured into their homes. It is believed that the trio must have had a relationship with the victims before attacking. Some also believe that the victims were easily lured because the trio looked like a regular family, and no one would suspect that they ran a cartel of cannibals. The women would lure women into their homes under some false pretext. While in a conversation with the victim, Jorge would sneak up from behind and stab the victim with a knife in the neck or with a hammer on the head. Afterwards, the trio would go ahead to cut the victim into pieces and separate the flesh from the victim's body. This was usually done in their bathroom. There, they would cut and wash the human flesh already separated from the bones. They would bury the bones in their garden, while the women would work together to prepare different delicacies with the flesh of their victims. They would cook some dishes with their victims' flesh and store the remaining in the freezer for the next few days. Most times, victims were women seeking to find a job as a babysitter for the family. Other times, victims are lured in under the pretext of giving advice or counsel. In an interview with Jorge, he stated that one of the victims was invited to their homes to receive the Word of God and counsel. In an interview done by the police, Isabella Perez admitted that she sold the meat pies containing human flesh to schools, hospitals, and members of the local police close to their homes. While neighbors admitted that she was famous for her meat pies, no one could have thought that they contained human flesh. The manner of making the meat pies was just like any other. The pastries were made, and then the stuffing was made up of minced meat mixed with different spices. However, instead of regular meat, it was human flesh. Although she admitted to selling meat pies that were stuffed with human flesh, she did not specify if the meat pies were stuffed with human flesh frequently. In an interview with Isabel, she stated that it was a moment of extreme weakness and brutality that I regret.
Por mim, não faria nada disso, nunca mataria nenhuma barata. Imagine gente.
Jorge admitted to buying Bruna, his mistress, a mincing machine to make minced meat. He also made a mention of the other delicacies that they would cook using human flesh. The rage. After the arrest of the trio, the community was filled with rage. No one could believe that cannibals lived amongst them. Many people testified that they were normal people, and no one would think that they killed and ate human flesh. What made the situation worse was that they fed human flesh to unsuspecting buyers. Isabella sold to schools and even healthcare centers near them. A local police officer also mentioned that he had eaten one of Isabel's meat pies. Everyone who had tasted Isabel's meat pie had at one point eaten the meat pie stuffed with human flesh. This realization got the whole community in rage. They marched straight to Jorge's home and set it ablaze. The fire was controlled early enough, and the police were able to save some shreds of evidence that pointed out their criminal act. For every serial killer on the surface of the earth, there is a motive. This is what drives them on their unending hunt for the next unsuspecting prey to devour. For Jorge, there was more to his motive than meets the eye. Jorge justified his monstrous acts by claiming that the women he killed were doomed to give birth to children who would become thieves and lowlifes in the future. In his defense, he and his two-woman crew were helping to rid the world of uneducated and uninformed people and their negative energy. In a sense, they were making the world a better and safer place for people to live in. As far as eating human flesh was concerned, he explained that they were not doing that because they enjoyed it. It was so that they could purify themselves. They also ate their flesh to purify the world since they were people whose flesh was not worthy of being buried on earth. They also believed that eating their flesh helped them remain free of the guilt and sin of having murdered them. They also believed that they helped in the reduction of the world's population. This was a grisly purification ritual, which they must carry out after every kill. While a search was going on in Jorge's home, they found a 50-page book titled Revelations of a Schizophrenic. This book contained the details of torture, black magic, and cannibalism done by Jorge. In the book, he wrote that he often heard voices and was obsessed with killing women. This is what led him to believe that he was on a mission to save the earth from impending doom. This statement made by Jorge suggests that his brutal killings was no more of an act of pleasure than it was an act birthed out of the need to do so. There was no definite pleasure, just the voices in his head telling him what to do now and then. Bruna explained that Jorge would tell her that he needed to do the killings because that was what the Bible wanted. He also mentioned that they would continue to eat the flesh until it was all gone. It was as though they were under compulsion to consume every bit of human flesh they had with them. They could not eat any other meat until it was all gone. Although Isabel never gave her reasons for stuffing her meat pies with human flesh, one could guess that it was done out of the need to purify other people around them, since they ate it for purification. It could also be that there was a quicker way to get rid of the human flesh they had with them. Bruna, speaking on their cannibalism act, claimed that Jorge believed it to be more logical for humans to eat human meat. He believed that since animals eat other animals, it was only right for humans to eat other humans. Jorge mentioned that the meat would last for 3 to 4 days, and within those days, they would eat meals made with human flesh for lunch and dinner. While Jorge's need for the killing was a case of a schizophrenic following orders in his head, Isabella and Bruna's case was much worse. They were believed to be sane humans who knew what they were doing. However, the love they had for Jorge turned them crazy. Crazy enough to execute the crazy ideas of a schizophrenic. Jorge, being good with words, manipulated them to believe that they needed to not only kill, but eat human flesh. Upon arrest, one could see glaringly that Isabel had come to her senses. It dawned on her that their actions had been wrong all along, and admitted that they have indeed done something unforgivable.
Eu tô apenas falando a verdade, a minha verdade. Eu não sou nenhum covarde.
After their arrest in 2012, Jorge did all he could to shift the blame. During questioning, he blamed Bruna, his mistress, for pushing him into doing all he did. At the time of arrest, Bruna was still young and had an air of arrogance around her. Like Jorge, she did not express any emotions or signs of remorse. Bruna stated in an interview that she was not the type to show emotions, and that is often misunderstood as arrogance. Isabel, on the other hand, broke down all throughout the trials, stating that this was an action she regretted. In her words, what she had done was unimaginable, and she couldn't even kill a cockroach, but she became not just a killer, but a cannibal as well. In an interview with Bruna, she explained that Jorge was the only man she ever loved. He was his first love, and she couldn't disobey him. So, when he started the killings, she was compelled to do so as he had spoken. It was easy to do the unthinkable, because she was blinded by love. According to her, she never felt the need to question what Jorge said. She just loved him and followed his commands. She was like a puppet in the direction of her puppeteer.
Foi amor à primeira vista. Amor à primeira vista.
Isabel, amid tears, also revealed that she had never had the heart to report Jorge's monstrous activities because she loved him. The testimony of both Bruna and Isabel revealed that Jorge was the mastermind behind all of the killings. Although his killings were impulsive, as he was following the instructions of the voices in his head, he remained the head of the cartel. He called the shots on who to kill and when next to do so. In December 2018, a jury in the northeastern city of Recife, in Brazil, found the trio guilty of murdering 2 women inside their home in February and March of 2012. The victims are Alexandra Falsal da Silva, age 20, who was lured under the pretext of hearing the word of God, and Giselle Helena da Silva, age 31, who came to the family to apply for a job as a babysitter. The presiding judge, Judge Ernesto Bezerra Cavalsanti, sentenced Jorge to 71 years imprisonment for double murder, concealment and vilification of a corpse, and robbery. Isabel Perez, his wife, was sentenced to 68 years imprisonment, while his mistress, Bruna, was sentenced to 71 years and 10 months imprisonment.
Que matar, depois de matar tinha que comer, que estava escrito na Bíblia.
The revelation of a schizophrenic. Jorge was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a type of mental disorder that involves a breakdown in the relation between thoughts, behavior, and emotion. This breakdown can lead to faulty perception, withdrawal from reality, and personal relationships, and inappropriate feelings and actions. This results in delusion and fantasy, and a sense of mental fragmentation. With the aid of professionals at the Psychosocial Care Center, Jorge was able to pin down his hallucinations. He titled the book, The Revelation of a Schizophrenic. The book had 34 short chapters, which described different hallucinations and thoughts he had from his childhood up until his adult life. In one of the chapters titled The Hovering Woman, he described a certain woman he had an encounter with when he was returning home from the house of Belle, his girlfriend. Belle, also Isabel, would later become his wife. In his account, he stated that he was riding on his bicycle on a deserted street when he realized that he was not alone. A woman was with him. This woman in his imagination soon disappeared when he got to the front of his house. The woman appeared again when he was about to sleep. He saw her beautiful feet, and they reflected in the window glass. He described the woman as beautiful, exotic, and scary. Scary because she was completely still and hovering above him. He could smell her perfume and couldn't get her out of his mind for the whole evening. He concluded the chapter by stating that he couldn't sleep for the rest of the night because he kept thinking about her. Jorge would later publish 3 other books. As of now, we do not know what has become of the trio, but we know for sure that they are serving time for their crime.